This is Resolute and Man Talk. I'm your founder and host, Vince Miller. So excited to have you with us again. This episode, we're dealing again with our newest book, 30 Virtues That Build a Man. Today, we're looking at the topic of identity. I think a topic that every man struggles with, right, John?
I think about identity, I would say at least, 5 times a day.
That's awesome. It's so true. Anytime we make a mistake or we're trying to figure out a new path to take in life,
Oh, my
or
goodness.
anytime we're shaped by a conversation or struck over the head by our wife, maybe sometimes, right? We're
Yeah.
thinking about our identity, right?
I think I drive my wife crazy. Like, she just sits back and listens now. She doesn't even respond because I will constantly be bouncing ideas off of her about maybe, what next business venture I should get into, or hey, this new idea I have, or maybe this new subject I want to study or thing I want to learn.
Yeah. But that's what I love about you is you always have a new idea. John Cook, thanks so much for being with us today. Let's dive into this topic. I think just like you're talking about there, I think we men have all kinds of ideas for our life and all kinds of things that I think pull at our passions. But this identity issue has got to be one of the biggest ones. I think about guys like you and the world that we live in and the opportunities that we have. There's so many things shaping our identity. What are the things that you've allowed to shape your identity in your life?
Well, I know that if I dig back into my past, things that I've let shape my identity would be just the friends around me, right? And trying to please them or make them think highly of me, right?
Yeah.
To look good,
Yeah.
I guess. I think that was a big part of my past, and it's something I've had to unlearn, ever since I kind of had that epiphany in my life, So, and the other things are just job, for sure. That's kind of defined me, my education. And sometimes that's been a chip on my shoulder because I quit college a little bit before I graduated to try some alternative paths. But those things I've had to wrestle through, like, man, sometimes I don't feel good enough because I didn't graduate college, or, I don't have maybe the house or car or things that other people have, or I don't look the way someone else does. So I think I've let these outward appearances in my life sort of shape who I am, and I've had to unlearn that for a long time.
Well, I meet guys just like you all the time who allow those things to become huge obstacles to them in really discovering the man that God called them to be, because that's really our path toward discovering our identity, right? Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head is we allow the things of this world to guide and direct our identity, and we feel that if we don't have them, then we're missing out on something. That old FOMO, fear of missing out. We
100%.
feel it a lot when it comes to our identity, right? So you talked about just social groupthink, right?
Yep.
We allow social groupthink and what other people think of us to shape who we are.
And it's such a false group. It's just so fake.
Yeah.
Like we put this in our head, and it doesn't really exist.
Now, most of those people are idiots, John. Let's just be honest. Those people, they're idiots. They do not know what's best for us.
That's a good point.
Right? Only our Creator knows what's best for us. The person who designed us knows what's best for us, not other people. But it's hard to undo that, right?
Yes.
You talked
Takes
about...
a lifetime sometimes.
Yeah, well, yeah. For most guys, it does take a lifetime. I was meeting someone for coffee this morning, and he was talking about how he had this incredibly long career at General Mills, and he had allowed that career to shape his life, and now he really wants to leverage who he is more fully and more purposefully. He's talking about his identity, right? He's talking about he wants to become the man God designed him to be.
Oh, yeah. That's so big in our culture right now. I think we all just have that in us, you know? I guess it's just part of who we are. But, look at culture, for example. What's his name? Simon Sinek, for example. The Start With Why guy. Why is that like one of the number one TED Talks out there? People are just, they want to know, like, what, I know I'm born for greatness, but what is that thing, you know?
Yeah.
And you look at the Netflix stuff, too. And it's just full of it.
I know, of course it is. And I think it's because we have this gaping hole in us. And, I know that many people have said that, we have a God-shaped hole right in the middle of us, designed only for God. But I think part of that shaping of that hole is us discovering our identity. It's this quest for really who we really are. I've struggled with it in my past too. I think I'm starting to get closer to it, to uncover it. But we as guys are on a quest to discover who we are, not who the world says that we are, not who our employer says that we are, not what our position description even says that we are. Right? We're looking for something more, and I think it's difficult. You've talked about this, I think, a little bit in your past, is that, you're kind of on this quest and you're kind of trying to discover it. How has this been frustrating for you? I mean, what frustrates you about the identity discovery process?
Number one for me would be just the overwhelming amount of opportunities today. You would think that would be a positive, but there's so many choices. I mean, just think of it. Like when you sit down with your wife or even yourself and you watch Netflix, you have, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of movies to choose from. You're probably not going to choose one because there's just too many options, right? It's like, what college do I go to? I mean, it's limitless. It's not just confined to my geographical area anymore. I can go anywhere in the world. What topic do I want to learn? Well, it's not just one college in your area anymore. It's 5 different apps, from, that have these Udemy's, of the world, and edX or FedEx or whatever that other app is. There's just lots of them. So many things you can learn right now. I could learn anything. I could go learn data science. I could learn marketing. I could learn to be, a scientist online now. We just have so much, and I think that's what's overwhelming is I can't pick that one thing that gives me traction and says, I'm going to move forward with that. So that focus is, I think, crippling right now.
Yeah, it's just the paralyzing number of choices can be incredibly overwhelming. I mean, just like you said at the beginning of the show, right? Like you're always telling your wife you've got another new idea, right? And it's because I think, number one, you're a passionate guy, you're a visionary guy, but I think it's also because there's so much opportunity and so much land to be taken in the world today that it creates this confusion on how to make a choice, especially, I would say, part of our problem is we're always looking for the answers out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes.
And we're always thinking the answers are out there somewhere when maybe the answers are to be found somewhere else. So, I mean, what have you learned through that process of being frustrated by all these choices? What has that taught you, John? Have you learned anything in particular about these array of choices? Have you learned to dispel some of them, let some of them go? What have they taught you?
I think what they've taught me is to honestly sit in a chair, sit still, and think about it. Write it down. Work through it. This is never going to end for you. You're going to always have this tension. You're always going to be trying to figure things out, John. It's never going to get to a point where I'm like the man at this one thing, and I just know that's what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. I'm gonna always be figuring it out and be okay with that. But like you said, don't look out there. Get in your word, get into prayer, and write things down in this journal, and figure out what your why is. Work it out, if that's your thing, But I think before the why, we probably got to find out the who. Who are we and whose are we?
Yeah.
What have you done to figure it out? You're in an amazing place in life where you're just doing fantastic things with Resolute. How have you gotten there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think you were onto something in just that last comment. I think that identity is something that's always being shaped, and I think we think that it's some place that we're going to arrive. I think that was a major discovery that I made somewhere in the middle of my spiritual journey. Was I discovered that I'm never going to be completely the man that God designed me to be. I'm always becoming. It's always a process of becoming. And so along the way, there's going to be all these choices and opportunities, and I'm going to have to filter through them and say, who is Vince, and how does he connect with God's calling? And I think both those things got to come together. In fact, I call that the convergence of our identity. When these two things come together, how God has designed me and his place in the world that I fit. And I think that's what guys are looking for when it comes to their identity, especially like things like their vocation, their leadership muscle, their spiritual impact that they leave on the world. They're looking for the convergence of those two things. Just like the guy I met with this morning at General Mills. He's doing great stuff for the kingdom, but he can't see how his unique role in his company connects to his calling, and he's struggling through those things, and so he's frustrated.
You just described me.
Oh,
I mean, and
did I?
probably every other man, right? Like, I want to know how you create that filter, because obviously I love that word filter to get that thing. Like, how do you do that?
Well, I think you got to I think part of it is understanding who you are. And like you said, not just who, but whose. I want to get after the who's in a second, but who you are. God designed you to be very unique, John. This is what I love about John. He's killer at marketing. He's killer at website design. He's killer at tools for doing those things. You're just great at that. I see that in you. That's your unique creation. God has wired you in such a way. You just understand situations, how to approach them, how to market to them, how to present them. That's how God has wired you. You're also looking for a place that connects to God's calling for your life, or a place where you can bring these two things together. And I think a lot of it revolves, unfortunately, around this one thing: cash money. And
you hit it.
I mean, honestly, I think that's the vice that keeps us from bringing these two things together. If you ask any guy out there right now why he's not living out his identity in Jesus Christ, I would believe most of it revolves around the fact that he's paid a good wage at his job, and he's got a lot of security from that, and he's now living in a rat race because he's bought things he cannot afford, and he could never imagine himself losing that job, because losing that job would mean losing those things and then losing that identity, and he'd have to start all over again. And I say to him, exactly. That's the hard part of this challenge, is money is related to it. So what I did with Resolute, clearly, is I brought my unique calling and my vocation together into one thing. And I said, I'm going to try to figure out a way to monetize how God has wired me. So our mission at Resolute is to disciple and develop men to lead. Guess what? That's my own personal mission, bro. Yep. It's not a business mission. It's my personal mission. And I've turned Resolute from just an average, ordinary organization that makes materials for guys that they can use on their own, one-on-one or in a group, to like my life calling and purpose. So I speak to men all the time about the passion I have and the finding of the convergence of those two things, because I believe that's what men are looking for. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I look at a guy like you, and I feel like you're really living the dream, because you're living your why, your purpose, right? And I think so many of us want to be able to get to that.
Yeah, and I think we're looking for it. It requires us to sacrifice some things, though. I need to make this point because I think it's really important. I actually think our calling is found in a following. That's really important. I think our calling is found in a following.
What does that mean?
So I think that Jesus' original call to us was to follow him. And it's when we follow him that we discover ourselves. That's where the who's come in. It's not just about who you are, but it's about whose you are. And clearly in our text today from 30 Virtues That Build a Man, we discover this. We discover that all the resources that we need for our identity are found in Christ, in Christ, in Christ, in Christ. It repeats it over and over again in Ephesians chapter 1. And what I love about it is that means that all of our identity and resources are found in Christ. And if we can live in that identity, then we can discover the man that God has called us to be. So let me give you an example of it. I think men struggle through all these identity challenges in their life, and they struggle with them because they don't live in the truth of who God has already called them to be. So in other words, when I become a Christian, I am redeemed, I am renewed, I am loved, I am adopted, I am called as his own. He sees me as beautiful. He fills me full of grace and mercy and forgiveness, and all these resources are found in Christ. That's the who's, in Christ.
I love
in
that.
him.
We need to be reminded of that every day.
Yeah, but we have to live in that identity.
Yeah.
Right? That's the challenge is We live in what other people think about us. You already said that. We live in who we think we want to be, right? We live in what we think other people think we should be,
Yep.
right? Sometimes we live in a state of mind where we just shame ourselves, the man we used to be,
Oh, that's a good one.
right?
Yeah.
But God calls us to live in the man that we actually are. And that's becoming the man that God designed us to be. And the man we were designed to be is Ephesians 1. We struggle through all these other identities before we really discover that it's in Christ, in Him, whose we are, in Him. That's our identity. And we got to live out of that. And that's not the power of positive thinking. That's the power of living in the man that God has called us to be.
Man, it's almost hard to accept because it seems so simple in some ways. Like when the way you say it, I mean, because it feels like I don't have to do anything in some ways, you know, because
Right.
I don't have to strive anymore. I don't have to shame myself anymore. I just have to almost be still and really accept what this word is saying about me. And I've never really thought about it in that way. It's just, John,
Right.
you know, this is who you are. I'm telling you right here. You don't have to be striving. You don't have to be shaming yourself. This is it, you know?
Exactly. So if we really begin with the fact that identity formation only happens in a relationship and context with Jesus Christ, if everything begins there, then everything shapes itself around us. Our vocation, our leadership, our family, our finances, everything is shaped around that. To be in Christ is to be completely redone in all we are. Is to reshape and reform who we are. We have to first submit there before anything else is going to happen. So if there's guys listening today that are really struggling with their identity, what they're really doing is they're struggling with themselves if they're not finding their identity in Christ. They're actually fighting with themselves. And you're going to spend a lifetime of arguing, fighting with yourself and even the things that you think in your mind because you're not turning to Christ to abdicate all that you are so that He can give you back a brand new identity.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. It's exhausting. It's hard. It's a daily battle. And remember, just like we said at the beginning, it's never going to end. We
Right.
never fully become until we arrive at the gates of heaven. Then we are reshaped. We're changed. We become wholly and completely His in that moment, no longer dealing with the sin of this world. It no longer shapes us, only Jesus Christ. And I think that's where the challenge is we got to fight for it every single day. And it all begins with a simple call to follow. That's where it all begins.
So I'm sitting across from you, and I believe everything you're saying. I want what you're saying. I mean, what is just one thing I can do, one practical takeaway where I can tomorrow just start applying this, or even today when I walk away and I'm driving to work?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. Here's where I would begin, is I would sit down with a brother, just like we're sitting down right here, and ask that guy what he sees in you. It's so fascinating to sit down with another guy and to have him say back to you what he sees in you. That's where it all begins, because get this, God designed us, knit us together in our mother's womb before we could ever think, before we were ever created. God had already designed us. What we're really on a path of understanding is the design that He had in mind for us. What's funny about it is other people see it so easily. I can see in you, John, that you are a passionate man, you're a visionary man, you're great at understanding people, you're great at marketing. You need someone to say that back to you so you can uncover who this man is. That's the first step. The second step is to stop believing what everybody else believes. Just stop it. And the third step, I'd say, is turn to Ephesians 1 and discover who you really are. You're adopted, you're loved, you're forgiven, you're full of grace and mercy. You're called His child. And then understand that you're placing this unique calling of who you are underneath the identity of Christ, and watch it explode. This is why people deal with a midlife crisis in their life. They've walked a career they thought was going to be fulfilling, right? But they've never really understood the convergence of these two things. Who am I uniquely? Who am I? And how does this connect with God's calling? And if we can just discover that in those little 3 steps, boy, your world will explode with meaning, and purpose, and you will find your identity first in Christ Jesus, and then how he's designed you will become used for the impact of his kingdom. That's where I'd go with it.
I love it. It's very practical. It gives me a lot to just kind of sit, be still with, and just really think through how can I put those steps into action. But I really love the idea of just getting together with a brother and asking that question. And I'll be real honest. Probably my first thought was, who's going to want to hear, or talk about you, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say I've come face to face with that a little bit in my life, where you might just be careful about the friends that you choose to speak in your life, but you are worth it, to have that time with that person speaking into your life. I mean, they are going to be able to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. Any perspective helps. And of course, godly perspective is even better. Right?
Yeah.
Of course. Well, guys, thanks for being with us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Man Talk. I really want to encourage you to pick up 30 Virtues That Build a Man. Great tool for resource as two guys are talking together right here. You're seeing us use this book together. Fun, right? We're having a good time?
Yeah, I love going through this stuff because it's given me the understanding I need.
Yeah, you took a lot of notes today. I hope you'll use those. But John, thank you so much for being with us. And guys, don't walk away from this time doing nothing. Do something. If you do nothing, then you're just contributing to the problem of man. Our greatest problem is apathy. What you need to do is to go out and do something. Maybe begin by purchasing 30 Virtues That Build a Man. You can get it on our website, beresolute.org/30. That's /30. Buy 1, 10, 100 a day. It's a great way to support our ministry and an ongoing effort. And we'll see you right back here again on another episode of Man Talk.